Hello. Time has a peculiar way of slipping by, unnoticed until a moment shakes you awake. It was during a challenging period in my life that I relocated to a bustling new city. The unfamiliar streets and towering skyline greeted me with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Starting fresh, I decided to simplify my life and let go of the clutter that had weighed me down. My car, for instance, was one of the first things to go. I wanted everything close, within walking distance, no distractions, just a new way to live. To compensate for the lack of a car, I indulged in a long-standing dream. I bought a Harley. That motorcycle became my therapy, my escape, and the place I'd go when the world became too loud. With every ride, I could feel myself finding a bit more freedom, something I hadn't felt in years. Mornings took on a new significance. I'd leave my apartment early, the city barely stirring as I headed to work, savoring those few minutes of solitude before the day's chaos set in. My job at a manufacturing firm became the most stable part of my life. I had a solid role, a promotion in sight, and I threw myself into the work with all the energy I had. On weekends, I'd take the Harley out of the city, following back roads and open highways, as if each ride could erase the memories I was trying to leave behind. But no matter how hard I tried, little reminders would surface, nagging at me when I least expected it. Even though I'd left my old life behind, there were times when the memories caught me off guard, a letter arriving in the mail, a voicemail from an old friend. These small moments reminded me that, although I was miles away from where I'd come from, the past had its own ways of resurfacing. Life was simple but satisfying in my new world. I'd go home to a renovated condo, a quiet sanctuary where everything was finally on my own terms. The fridge was stocked with my favorite wine, the kitchen was pristine, and my home gym kept me busy in the evenings. Yet even in this new life, the past hovered on the edges, like a shadow waiting to remind me that some things couldn't be left behind as easily as others. As I settled into my new life, I'd almost convinced myself that the past could stay buried. But memories have a way of creeping in, especially late at night. Sometimes, I'd find myself staring at the walls of my condo, thinking about Rebecca, my ex-wife, and how everything had fallen apart. We'd built a life together, shared dreams and plans for the future, and for a while, it seemed like nothing could touch us. But beneath the surface, cracks had started to form long before I even realized. Rebecca and I had met in college, both ambitious and full of hope. She was fierce, with a drive that matched my own, and for years, we thrived in the chaos of building careers and navigating adulthood. But as our lives grew more demanding, our connection began to wear thin. Looking back, maybe we'd both changed more than we wanted to admit, but I couldn't see it then. I thought we were strong enough to handle anything. Then came the betrayal, an affair I hadn't seen coming. When I found out, it felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under me. Rebecca tried to justify it, saying she felt neglected, that my work had become my priority. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She said she needed something more, something I hadn't been giving her. Her words were like knives, each one cutting a little deeper. She begged for forgiveness, promised to make it right, but I was already gone. I couldn't stay in a marriage where trust had been shattered so completely. The divorce was brutal. There was no way to untangle years of shared memories without reopening wounds that were barely starting to heal. Family and friends had their opinions, but none of them knew the extent of the pain. I tried to keep my dignity, to walk away with as little bitterness as possible, but the truth was that I was haunted by the sense of failure. I'd given everything to that relationship, only to have it crumble in my hands. Now, in my new city, I tried to push Rebecca and the memories of our life together out of my mind. But there were nights when I'd catch myself wondering what could have been, if maybe things could have turned out differently. I'd built walls around my heart, keeping everyone at arm's length. Moving on felt like the only way to protect myself, but the scars from our marriage lingered, no matter how hard I tried to hide them. Each day, I reminded myself that the past was behind me, that Rebecca was a chapter I'd closed. But some ghosts are harder to shake than others, and I was beginning to realize that letting go would take more than just distance and a fresh start. After weeks of solitude and reflection, I knew I needed more than just work and my Harley to fill the emptiness that seemed to follow me. My new city was alive with people, events, and places I'd barely explored, and I figured it was time to dive in. One Friday night, I forced myself to check out a local wine bar just a few blocks from my condo. It was a sleek, modern place, filled with young professionals unwinding after a long week, laughing over glasses of wine and tapas. I felt a little out of place, but I also knew I had to start somewhere. I ordered a glass of Cabernet, found a quiet corner, and watched as people moved through the bar, relaxed and carefree. For the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a sense of belonging here, a space where I could start over and redefine myself. As the weeks went by, I made it a point to get out more. I started hitting the gym regularly, pushing myself to build strength, not just physically but mentally. I even picked up cooking, a skill I'd neglected for years. I found it oddly therapeutic, following recipes, experimenting with flavors, and finally savoring a meal that I'd prepared with my own hands. It was a small joy, but it was mine, something I hadn't shared with anyone since my marriage. People began to notice me around the neighborhood, a few familiar faces at the bar, the barista who knew my coffee order by heart, a fellow gymgoer who'd nod in recognition. These small connections felt like the building blocks of a new life. Yet, every time I felt a hint of closeness with someone, I'd pull back, remembering how easily trust could be broken. I made sure to keep my social interactions light, keeping the scars from my marriage hidden beneath the surface. I wasn't ready to talk about the past, not to anyone here. If they asked, I'd just say I was recently divorced and leave it at that. I wanted to be defined by more than the pain I'd carried, but moving forward was harder than I'd expected. The ghost of Rebecca's betrayal lingered, casting a shadow over every new connection I tried to make. Still, I clung to these small steps forward, the wine bar, the gym, my motorcycle rides. Each one felt like a piece of myself returning, a quiet reminder that, despite everything, I could still rebuild, one small joy at a time. One evening at the wine bar, as I was nursing a glass of red and enjoying the buzz of the crowd, I noticed a woman at the bar glancing over at me. She was elegant but unpretentious, with an easy smile that seemed to brighten the room. Normally, I'd nod politely and go back to my own space, but something about her felt inviting, like maybe she understood what it meant to carry a past that was hard to let go of. Eventually, she came over, introducing herself as Sarah. We struck up a conversation, exchanging small talk about our jobs and favorite places in the city. There was something about her calm demeanor that put me at ease, and before I knew it, we were laughing over stories of awkward first dates and travel mishaps. It felt natural, easy, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I could feel myself relaxing, letting my guard down a bit as we talked. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I began to see each other more often, meeting for coffee, dinners, and walks through the city. She shared stories about her own life, her career, and her move to the city a few years back. But I kept my story vague, careful to avoid the raw details of my divorce and the betrayal that still haunted me. I told myself I was protecting her, sparing her the weight of my past. Yet, deep down, I knew I was afraid of opening myself up, only to be hurt again. One night, as we strolled through the park under the streetlights, Sarah asked about my marriage. She'd picked up on the hints I'd dropped, the guarded way I spoke about the past, and her curiosity was gentle but persistent. For a moment, I hesitated, feeling the urge to shut down. But something about her quiet patience, the way she looked at me without judgment, made me feel safe. I went through a tough divorce, I finally admitted, my voice low. It was hard. Harder than I expected, and it's left me a little more guarded than I'd like to be. She nodded, her expression soft. It's okay, Daniel. We've all got our scars. Sometimes it just takes time to let someone in again. Her words struck me, and I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could move forward. I wasn't sure if I was ready to trust fully, but Sarah's kindness made me believe that, with time, I might be able to. For the first time in a while, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by the pain of my past. But even as I started to open up to her, a small voice in the back of my mind reminded me of the risks, of the pain that had once caught me off guard. I knew this journey would be slow, but I was beginning to believe it was possible. As the weeks went by, my connection with Sarah grew stronger. We spent more time together, enjoying the simplicity of shared meals, late-night conversations, and quiet mornings with coffee. There was a gentleness to our relationship, something that felt steady, honest. For the first time in a long while, I felt a warmth I'd thought I'd lost forever. And yet, as things deepened, so did the old fears and doubts. Every time I felt myself growing closer to her, a part of me would tense up, like I was bracing for impact. In the back of my mind, there was always that whisper, a nagging reminder of Rebecca's betrayal, that reminder of how blindsided I'd been. I found myself searching for signs in Sarah, even though she'd done nothing to deserve my mistrust. I'd glance over when she'd text someone, wondering if there was something I didn't know. The feeling gnawed at me, a ghost from my past I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. One night, as we sat on my couch, she noticed my distraction. "Are you okay, Daniel?" she asked, her voice gentle but direct. "You seem distant tonight." I hesitated, but something inside me knew it was time to be honest. I couldn't keep carrying this weight alone, not if I wanted any hope of a future with her. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Sometimes I struggle with trust," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "My marriage ended in a way that made it hard to believe people could stay honest. It's not fair to you, but it's something I'm still working through." She reached for my hand, her touch grounding me. "I understand," she said softly. "I can't imagine what that must have been like. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I hope, in time, you can see that." Her words offered comfort, but the fear didn't disappear overnight. I knew I was standing at a crossroads, where I had to decide whether I was going to let my past dictate my future. Sarah's patience and understanding gave me hope, but I realized that the real work was mine to do. I couldn't ask her to carry the weight of my past with me, it was up to me to find a way to let it go. Over the next few days, I made a conscious effort to confront my insecurities. I let myself feel the pain of the betrayal I'd endured, rather than pushing it down. I stopped questioning Sarah's every move, choosing instead to trust the person she'd shown herself to be. It was difficult, but little by little, I felt the hold of the past start to loosen. In the quiet moments alone, I reminded myself that not everyone was destined to break trust, that I could allow myself to hope without bracing for heartbreak. Sarah was giving me a second chance at something real, and I was finally starting to believe I could take it. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah and I decided to take a day trip out of the city. We packed a picnic and rode my Harley up to a secluded park overlooking the hills. The air was crisp, and the trees were painted with the warm colors of autumn, the perfect setting for a quiet escape. For the first time, I felt genuinely at peace, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, sharing this moment with someone who understood me. We spread out a blanket, unpacked our lunch, and spent hours just talking about everything and nothing, our dreams, places we wanted to visit, even the small joys that made each day worth it. Sarah had a way of making me feel like I was safe, that I could be vulnerable without fear. The more we talked, the more I realized how much lighter I felt, like the weight of my past was finally lifting. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the hills, she turned to me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I've noticed something about you," she said, her voice warm. "You're always looking for signs that things might go wrong, but you rarely look for the reasons they might go right." Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I'd spent so long guarding myself, building walls to protect against any hint of pain, that I'd forgotten how to embrace the possibility of happiness. She was right. I'd been so focused on avoiding heartbreak that I'd been missing out on everything that was right in front of me. At that moment, I reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I don't want to live in the past anymore, Sarah. You've helped me see that I don't have to carry it with me forever. I want to be here, now, with you." Her face softened, and she leaned in, brushing her lips against mine. It was a simple kiss, but it felt like a promise to let go of what had been and to embrace what could be. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by the shadows of my past. I wasn't waiting for things to fall apart. I was here, with her, in this moment, fully present. As we rode back home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of hope. It wasn't that I'd completely forgotten the pain of my past, but rather that I'd finally found a way to carry it without letting it control me. Sarah had given me that gift, and in doing so, she'd given me a reason to believe in love again. After that day in the park with Sarah, something inside me shifted. I'd finally allowed myself to let go of the fear that had gripped me for so long. I stopped overanalyzing every text, every silence, and every look. I allowed myself to enjoy the calm that came from simply being present, knowing that, for once, I wasn't weighed down by the past. Our connection grew deeper, and so did my confidence in our future. We spent more weekends together, exploring the city, meeting her friends, and even discussing the idea of going on a trip together. The idea of making plans, real plans for the future, no longer felt intimidating. Instead, it filled me with excitement. I felt grounded, balanced, and, most importantly, free. One evening over dinner, I told Sarah about my past in more detail than I ever had. I opened up about the betrayal, the divorce, and the pain I'd carried with me for years. She listened without judgment, reaching for my hand and offering the kind of quiet strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. "I'm sorry you went through all of that, Daniel," she said, her voice gentle. "But I'm grateful that you let me in, that you let yourself feel again. You deserve happiness, and I want to be part of it." Her words felt like a final key to a lock I hadn't known was still closed. I realized then that I'd found something real, something I could trust. I no longer needed to hold back or question every emotion. I could move forward, fully and freely, with someone who saw me for who I truly was. In that moment, I made a decision. I wanted to build a future with Sarah, not just for the moment, but as a commitment to the life we were creating together. I wanted to let her know that I was ready to take that step, to choose love without fear, and to embrace the possibility of something lasting. I felt a warmth and peace settle over me, and for the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was ready for what lay ahead, knowing that I had finally let go of the shadows of my past and was stepping into a new chapter with open arms. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this new life with Sarah was where I was truly meant to be. Gone was the constant fear, the gnawing insecurity. In its place was a calm certainty, a steady, quiet happiness that I hadn't believed I'd feel again. Sarah had shown me that love could be both gentle and strong, and in her presence, I felt as if I'd finally come home. One evening, as the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow through the windows of my apartment, I knew it was time to take the next step. I invited Sarah over, and we shared a simple dinner, laughing and reminiscing about how far we'd come since we'd first met. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic speech. Instead, I looked into her eyes and simply said, "I want this. I want us." Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table, taking my hand. "So do I, Daniel. I want to build something real with you." In that moment, the last of my doubts faded away. We talked late into the night, dreaming up plans for the future, discussing where we might go and what kind of life we could create together. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace and joy that was no longer haunted by the shadows of the past. In the weeks that followed, I slowly began introducing Sarah to my family and closest friends. I shared parts of my life with her that I'd kept hidden, trusting that she would hold them with care. Together, we created new traditions, blending our lives in a way that felt effortless, natural. It was the kind of love I'd once believed was impossible. Reflecting on my journey, I felt a sense of gratitude. The pain and betrayal of my past had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. I had chosen to let go, to open my heart again, and in doing so, I'd found something more profound than I'd ever imagined. As we stood together one evening, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, and I realized that I was no longer looking back. The future was ours, filled with possibility and hope, and I was ready to embrace it fully. This was my new chapter, my new life. And for the first time, it felt like everything was finally in place. Bye-bye.